Okay, so School of the Prophets.
School of the Prophets. First of all, it was. I think that was the one of the greatest blessings. That, okay, I think that was one of the greatest blessings that I was given coming to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But then the School of the Prophets, it helped give me a foundation that I had gravitated to. Again, if anything good can be said about me,
Mm-hmm.
it gets credit also. All of you get credit, but everybody.
Credit. Definitely, that's a big part of who you are.
And Nasi Shaleak, and the connection and relationship that came developed out of that. All that was School of the Prophets. I'll never forget that. I was diligent. I was diligent. I was very studious.
Mm-hmm.
So looking for information, wanting information. I would in Mitzpeh Ramon, one of the jobs that we had was gardening.
Gardening?
Right.
Oh, okay.
For the
like a communal garden?
No, municipality, going around and cleaning up the different greenery there,
mm-hmm.
etc. Sweeping the streets and everything. And that was the time that I would study and go over School of the Prophets work.
While you were supposed to be working?
While I was supposed to be working.
So you were somewhere hiding.
Well, yeah. I mean, you go walk out when everybody has to report in at the place, right?
Right.
And I never forget the manager of us was named Mordecai,
mm-hmm.
and he always reminded me of one of those little elves. That's how he looked, and that's how he walked,
mm-hmm.
like one of those little elves and everything. And at first he didn't like me, but at the end of it, he was inviting me to his house.
Wow.
And he would say,
what did you do to him?
I don't know, but he started to. We would get into conversations, and he was just interested, and to the point that it was getting annoying because I knew that he would be coming looking for me, so I could not hide and stuff like that. But then I told him, listen, I'm studying. I'm in university. I'm studying school because School of the Prophets was university level,
right.
And he would say, so what are you studying? He started to get interested in the community and everything, and we became good friends.
Wow.
At one point he was complaining, because he's the manager and you're supposed to be working. One time it got to a point where he would just give me an assignment to do. You need to clean this area, sweep these streets, and then if you want to, you can sit down and you can study.
Oh, okay.
And that's the relationship we had established.
And he probably respected the fact that you were studying and that you were pursuing something at a higher level.
Hopefully, but it worked. It worked. Right, it worked and everything. So, so going down and sitting with the brothers and Nasi Shaleak and that spirit, and it just opened that desire to want to know more and more and more. Mm-hmm. So there were certain brothers that I just automatically gravitated to. So it was the Nasi Shaleak. I never missed a presentation by Abba Gadol.
Okay.
Never. There were others, Prince Asiel, even though
he would come and go.
He would come and go,
speaker.
but naturally, so I would be there. There weren't a lot. There weren't that many.
Right.
There was a brother by the name of Ben Ami. That's Aviel's. You remember him? He was
Aviel's
tall.
Abba?
That was married to a Kovita.
Yeah, he was just here not too long ago.
Yeah.
He was here. He was here for some months.
I did not know. Had I known,
he
was one of my first mentors.
Wow.
It was him, and it was brother. Remember Yosef? Yosef?
No.
He was always on international staff. Small brother.
Short brother.
Yeah.
I think vaguely. Yeah. Vaguely.
He was one of my first. These are the big brothers that taught me. Mm-hmm. I'm not just saying you don't put your hand in fire. I'm talking about the more in-depth, detailed of things about kingdom and life and everything. Him, Ben Ami, Yosef, Benzion was
Okay.
was I looked at him as a brother that I can go to and listen, and they imparted wisdom
Right.
and understanding, and I was drawn to that, right? And then I liked their deliverance also. These are brothers that they were articulate.
Right.
They knew how to use words and everything. And I liked that, right? Now, all the brothers have their portion
Right.
and everything. All the brothers are wise and full of understand. Okay?
I'm going to edit that out.
You can learn something from everybody, believe
You can. You absolutely can.
And that's one thing that they told me, that sometimes even your enemies become your best teachers at times. And that's what stuck with me for even up to this day. Those that don't like you, you can learn something from it.
Even if it's just to learn what not to do.
What not
to be like them.
Right. So so this is School of the Prophets. The studies were on point, and something
they fed your soul. I went to School of the Prophets, and it nourishes your soul.
Absolutely.
And so
absolutely, which caused me to, I don't know if you've heard this before, but when you teach, you cannot feed the mind and starve the soul.
Never heard
that's
that. That's
what they did. They fed the soul.
Fed your soul.
If you're going to teach, you just can't give information. You have to feed the soul.
Right.
Now, there's a word for that, feeding the soul, and it's called edification.
Okay, edification.
Right.
All right.
And this is something that, some more things that need to be added to the School of the Prophets curriculum and teachers and everything. You just can't get up and give a presentation. And this is the formula that I've used, and it allowed me to take the School of the Prophets document and to matriculate from teaching in grammar school to junior high school to high school to colleges and universities and lectures. That whole idea of you give the information, but you have to balance it out with something that when that touches the souls of the people, even our not so warm spirited, fair-skinned brothers and sisters and everything. They would love. When Dr. David Israel, David Israel, is my lecturer, it was like they would call me they would cause problems. All this is School of the Prophets now. Okay, you learn all this from the School of the Prophets. I know it sounds strange, but Nasik Shaleak had put together a curriculum that we studied everything. So when the saints ask me sometimes, so what do you teach at universities? And I tell them, well, I teach law, business administration, I teach education. There's a health program that I'm teaching now, this and that and other. And they would say, where did you learn all that? And I said, from the School of the Prophets, because that's what Nasik gave us. That was the curriculum then, So naturally you were dedicated. It was a thirst, a burning thirst. I got to get to this. I don't miss School of the Prophets. And I didn't miss coming from Mitzpah for years. Back and forth.
Twice a week.
Right. So I'll never forget, I'm going to share this. Not going to mention any name. But I was one of the ones chosen to, do you remember Brother Abner?
Yeah, I remember Abner, yeah.
Okay. I love Abner. I understand everybody, I love Abner,
right.
He's definitely a colleague, right? But so we were ones that were chosen to graduate the 1983 class.
Okay.
And there was sister called Yeshiva.
Yeshiva?
Right.
Loved Yeshiva.
Loved her. And who else was it? There was one more. But so we had to give presentations. And there was some opposition of me giving presentations. that came up, right? And it was strong opposition, to the point where when they were organizing, you know, you have to organize. They had a particular brother organizing everything, and he wouldn't call me and let me know the day and the time and everything, and yeah. So there was opposition. So the day of our graduation, I got a standing ovation. You know?
The one they didn't want to speak.
And then he never came up. But you know,
right.
To this day, you know, every time, you know, there might be something else to it, but that's right.
Okay, New World Chronicles and hermeneutics.
Excellent. So many people may not know this, but when you study history, there's a criteria that it has to meet. So any information that you come up with, any dates, any facts, have to be written in the past, and you just reference it.
So give me an example.
If let's say the story of why the Bible isn't considered a history.
Okay.
Because there was no one that back then that wrote and recorded the events that took place in the Garden of Eden, or interviewed Adam. So there's nothing written there. So that's not considered a history book or history, right? So, but if you go back, European, since the onslaught of the Europeans and everything is recorded. From them conquering, the conquerors and those that were conquered.
Except what's not recorded is all the destruction, all the things that they destroyed that came prior to them.
Right.
So they could substantiate themselves.
Right. So that's history. A lot of people don't know. So if there's not evidence, recorded evidence
from that time period,
whether it's through archaeology,
something written,
right, or any artifacts or something like that, then they don't accept that.
Okay.
That's why Bible is not accepted as a history book. However, that was the power that the Europeans had when you talk about history and everything. They had the power to define. It was them that said it's going to be thus, 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 and thus. But then you have to remember, we had that power to define. Adam had that power to define. That's the whole idea of naming the animals and everything. So Adam had the legal authority, lost the legal authority. It was passed on to the ancient Gentile world power structure at that time, then transferred to the modern European American power structure. So they define what is what. So they define what a Hebrew is, what a Jew is, whatever. They define love. They define family. They define those standards and everything. So New World Chronicles deals with Scripture, Bible, as history. That's the basic difference there. We believe that those writings is or are history. Okay. And this is important if you're talking about the kingdom ideology, that it's history. What they said is history. All right. The challenge is the colonization of the Bible. That's the challenge. If what they translated is accurate to the Hebrew, that's the great challenge right here. You know. So, and that's one of the things that I'm doing today. But we could talk about that. So that's the difference between history and New World Chronicles. History, it has to be, your reference has to be recorded from writings or archaeological finds. New World Chronicles is based on Bible as that, and with that as a history.
Okay. And hermeneutics?
Hermeneutics is a Greek term which simply means interpretation.
Okay.
Now the idea came from Nasi Shaleak. Okay, again, this is something interesting because we're having a struggle with that today. There's always, if there's not ascension, there's not progress, and I'm using words that have to be defined also, right? Because the Euro-Gentile world power structure is progress.
Mm-hmm.
To have a car, to have a mobile phone, they consider that
progress. But progressing to what?
That's the point. And that's what we have to ask ourselves. Even when you're talking about leadership, leading to what? Can that be defined? Can you give us some tangible benchmarks as to if we've hit this, hit that, hit this, hit
Goes
that?
Back to that will, purpose, and intent you talked about.
Will, purpose, and intent. There are two, and you've heard this before, there are two dates that are the most important dates in a person's life. Their birthday, and the day that they understand why they were born.
Never heard that before, but it makes sense.
But when you, we're talking about kingdom ideology right now, which is not taught. So, where did we come from? I didn't come from Chicago. You didn't come from, where were you born?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
That's not where you came from. We didn't come from America. We came from a place called heaven.
Okay.
But to take the myth and religion out of heaven, if you look at the etymology of the word in Hebrew, it's simply a place where Yah is. Or where Yah is. Be with me now. Yah is there. Where Yah is there, that's Sham Yah. And then it has the plural, Hebrew plural with the Yud Mem Sophi. That's heaven. That's heaven. Now we're going into metaphysics right now. I don't know.
That would be probably a whole class.
That's a whole class.
Yeah.
So we'll let that.
You just got to get back in School of the Prophets and start teaching again.
Yeah, they don't want me teaching it. I'll get in trouble. I might get in trouble for some things I say right here.
Well,
but, yeah, just and I believe, because I've talked about this to a couple of people, decision makers and everything, and they understand it, but we're in a very interesting season right now, and I believe that we are misinterpreting the expression "stay aligned."
With your purpose.
They don't even add that. They just say, "Just stay aligned."
Oh, so they took that
part off. Just stay aligned. Just stay aligned. You know. So,
but you are staying aligned. You're staying aligned with a greater purpose.
With a purpose. That's the thing about it. But then, if you ask them again, well, what's the purpose? We're not hitting it. This is another. You know, I don't think the majority, we don't know what our purpose is. So you hear, and maybe you can do social experiment. You know, what is our purpose? What is your purpose? What is our purpose? What is this purpose? Some might say to worship Yah.
And then my question would be, how do you do that? How is that manifested in a day-to-day? How do you do that? And then my question would be, the book that I wrote for my granddaughter, who is Yah? That was a children's book I wrote years ago. Who is Yah? Where the little girl's asking her father, who is Yah? Does he work? Does he have a job? Does he do this? Does he? And how do you know who Yah is? And the father explains that Yah is represented in the things that you do on a daily basis. Right. When you look in the mirror.
Right. I like that.
I'll show you the book before you leave.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but I like that.
So. Okay, so we did hermeneutics.
Right. Well, hermeneutics again is the interpretation.
Okay.
Just deals with interpretation. That's what it is. Interpreting.
Okay. All right. So, how did you begin working in Israeli academics? What was that experience, or what is that experience like?
Cut. This is another. We're going into a seemingly. Wow. Before any exponential growth spiritually with me, it was preluded by sorrow and pain. Well, so that I was one of the 46, right?
The Rehovot?
Yeah.
You were at Rehovot?
Yeah, I was one of the brothers that didn't. I was in jail. We were in prison, 9 months?
I had no idea. Talk to me a little bit about Rehovot. I had no idea.
This was the prelude to the Day of the Show of Strength.
Yeah, I know that Rehovot was the prelude to the Day of the Show of Strength, but I had no idea that you were one of the 46.
Yeah, because people don't want to, But anyhow, yeah. The last 3 brothers that weren't deported, we were only 3 that weren't deported. That was Sar Absalom, Ashriel's father, Sar Bakuya, and myself.
3 of you all, but you served, they kept you in prison.
Right.
For 9 months,
right.
You said? So you all were there the night that they came, they arrested everybody.
Absolutely.
Kept you all in prison for
Absolutely.
9 months, and then let the 3 of you all stay here and deported everybody else.
Not less. I'll never forget when we got word of the day that we were being released. First of all, everybody in that wing, it was called Agaf's wing.
Yeah.
Agaf Shalosh. You talking about roaring and screaming?
You talking about Israelis?
Demona, and Arabs and everybody. Demona, and some of them were crying.
Wow!
When we were released, the warden called us into the office. You know those long business tables, and then you have the desk, and he sits there.
Mm-hmm.
Saw Bakuya and saw Absalom sat on that side, I sat on this side. And the first thing he said, "Have a seat." Now this is the one that told us that when we were, this is what he told me at least, that when we were in prison, incarcerated, he called me into his office and he said, this is the second day.
The second day after the arrest?
Right. He said, we've deported all of your men and women in the community, and we've taken your children and put them into adoption agency.
Wow.
Right.
They took the men and put them, say that again?
They said that I was calling to I didn't know what he wanted,
mm-hmm.
but he called me out of the cell, and he had naturally some of the guards escort me to his office.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Sit down." I don't know why he chose me. He said, "Sit down." He said, "We've deported all your men and women, and we've taken all of your children and put them into adoption agencies." And then he looked at me, and then he told the guard, "Take him back to the cell."
He was planting a seed of some kind.
Was
he implying that that's what he had done to all the people in Dimona?
Right.
Wow.
There are no more Hebrews in it.
Oh, wow. He was trying to really scare you.
Right. And I didn't say anything. There was nothing in my spirit to say, I need to say something.
Mm-hmm.
Just listen. And so I went back, I shared it with Sarbakuya and Absalom and everything. And they just smiled. They just smiled. They smiled. They didn't like, they just smiled. And that was a lesson in itself, you know. And that's the spirit that we went through that whole ordeal with. They would say things and we would just smile. And it goes back to, again, ideology and what we accept as our philosophy and everything, and this philosophy and ideology of the kingdom that's not taught. It needs to be taught.
Yeah.
What was this day of the show of strength? What was this 46? Even with yourself, everything that you've been through, there's something there in your mind that you, like you say, you can't. You just can't listen. It's on you, So, and that's a good thing, because that's evidence. When you read those stories in the Bible, it's the same thing. Remember, Joseph had a vision, and you've heard this before, so I'm just echoing what you've heard already. But Joseph had a vision that he would be the provider of his family. And this was in contrast to the culture at that time, that the oldest. So all his brothers said, "Kid, you little peeps, you wait till daddy and mama go to work." They grabbed this guy, they beat him, bloodied him, dragged him out of the house, took him and put him in a hole. Good God, a hole. And left him for dead. Told the parents he died. He just disappeared, but we heard he died, right? And so I believe that while he was in that hole, Joseph said to himself, "What I see is not what I saw." Mm-hmm. You've heard this before. What I see now in this position of all this stuff that I'm going through is not what I saw. That this is the kingdom. We're supposed to be here. We're supposed to be the kings. People are supposed to be something. What I see now, when I'm hungry for that, I want something that's except for boga.
Right.
Or when I'm going through this relationship and I feel that I'm not being done right, or when decision makers, even there's conflict there and everything, is not what I saw, right? We have to be like Joseph. So that simply means is that what you see is temporary. What you're going through is temporary. The boga season was temporary. The struggles internally was temporary. And I think this is why when things happen with me, I'll take responsibility for it all. But I just believe, like that little smile that I learned how to do from Absalom and Sarbakuya. They just smile.
Because they know this too shall pass.
That this too is temporary. So no matter what you go through, it's temporary. Don't give up. It's temporary. Can you imagine if Joseph just
gave up?
I'm dead. My family, my brothers.
Or if he held on to it and allowed it to fill him with bitterness and anger.
If he held on it, he let it go. And that's the formula that saved me. I'm not supposed to be here on paper. I talk to my family members very rarely, but every time I talk to one of them, my aunt, I love very dearly, but I haven't seen her since I was a teenager. But she said, "So when you coming home?" And it's almost
I'm
50
at home.
years.
My family says, "When you coming home?" I'm home. This is home.
Because you initiated the formula of survival. This is the kingdom. You got to let it go. I know it's hard.
You know what? I like the term instead of "let it go," because those who are victims, when you say to a victim, "let it go," that's a process. And they always find that to be offensive, because it's as if you're diminishing what happened to them. So what I say is find a way to come to terms with it or to rise above it.
Okay, great.
Excellent. Yeah, that's because
because you will rise
above it if you follow the steps that are necessary to do so.
Excellent.
And if you desire to.
And you know another thing I believe, that if Adam's mission, his purpose, and when I say Adam is what you call a singular collective. Okay. Yeah. I was just talking about Adam. I was saying that Adam is a collective. Okay. All right. He was created to do something, right? And the narrative starts with in the beginning, or in a beginning, like we're saying now.
Right.
Elohim created the heavens and the earth was without form and void and dark. So this word darkness, well, then after that, and it says and light, and then it talks about light, right? Now we've always heard that we're supposed to be the light of the world. So when you look at the etymology of the word light, which is Aleph Resh, it's a two-parent root word, Aleph Resh, but it's really Aleph Vav Resh, but that's a whole nother story. And then you go into researching that into ancient Hebrew. The word stems from, this is going to sound strange, organization. In Hebrew, the word organization is, or the infinitive is le'argain, to organize. That's what you call an infinitive,
right.
Okay? To organize. And if you take that idea and put it where light is, then it coincides with Adam's purpose. If light is organization, then darkness is disorganization.
Okay.
So again, if we substitute the word light every time we see light for organization, it coincides with the mission or why Adam was created, why we were.
It also coincides with you have to get up and do something.
You have to do something. As a matter of fact, do you know that Hosea 4:6 says that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge? Mm-hmm. In Hebrew, the word destroyed does not appear there. Destroyed is laharot, he res samech, right? In Hebrew it says nidmu ami, and nidmu comes from the word silent, or to be in the passive, to be made silent. Mm-hmm. Either it's from the root word silent, but in that's that nephil, to be. Mm-hmm. So when you read it like that, so my people are silent for what? A lack of knowledge. What is that knowledge? Anything written in those scriptures are relating to one narrative: a king, his desire to expand his domain. Mm-hmm. Thus we have the word king and his domain, kingdom, right? And his children that are kings and queens. Adam is a singular collective word, just like you say group. It's a singular noun, but the idea is a collective constructs to it, right? If you take the word family, so it's the same thing with Adam. Adam wasn't one person. Adam was a civilization, like we've been saying, right? Now, okay, so we got that clear, right?
Right.
So he was created. Why? Because darkness covered the earth, or there was disorganization. So where did this disorganization come from? Then you'd have to go back to the root of the whole story of, quote unquote, the serpent or Satan in Ezekiel. I don't know if I don't want to get too biblical and everything, but there's a story there, and it talks about a figure who was an angel, who was one that sat on with Yah in heaven. He was present when Yah created everything, even Adam, and he became envious and jealous, and this is the one that it says that once he thought that he could be like Yah, he was kicked out of heaven to earth. It says this, to earth. And he took 1/3 of heaven with him to earth, right? Now, whether we look at this as mythical or not, but if you're talking about New World Chronicles, we have to look at it that there's something there, right? So he created all this darkness. And if you go to Job, the story of Job starts off with what happened in heaven and after that. Job wasn't an isolated incident. Job was talking about when Satan was cast to earth, and he was asked a question when the sons and daughters were gathered. He was acknowledged, and he was asked a question, what are you doing? And he said, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to and fro through the earth, testing your creation, testing the souls of men, right? That's the story of Job. What are we going through now? We've been brought here, and whatever individual struggle that you're having, that's a test. That's how I look at it. If you get an idea, and there are only two wheels, okay? The expanding the kingdom. If you're not going to expand the kingdom, you'll be expanding and maintaining a kingdom of darkness and everything. So if you get an idea, this idea, you'll be tested. It's automatic. It comes with the territory. I call it quality control.
Okay.
Adam needed quality control because when we read the story of Adam, it doesn't say anything about Adam contested his, I'm going to use these terms, okay, Eve's or Chava's decision to enjoy this knowledge that she got, that they call fruit and everything, and that it was good and everything. There's nothing written there that he contested that. He didn't oppose it. He didn't stand up against it. And as a matter of fact, she gave him the ideas, and he said, "Wow, that sounds pretty good. This doesn't have anything to do with male or female."
Right. Okay.
We'd have to go into the etymology of Adam and what that means and everything. All right. Didn't have any. A man can be Chava or Eve. A woman can be Adam.
Now you know that's a whole class.
That's a class in itself. Don't let me get too nerdy. I told you that.
Well, that's a class, so we definitely. I told you got to go ahead and make some classes. You know what I'm saying? You got to make some content.
Yeah.
You can sit at home and do this.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, actually, these are some of my books talk about all this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, then we got to get those books published.
But anyhow, I'm saying all that to say, help me why did I start off? We be gone. We gone.
Yeah, a whole other conversation. I don't even remember what we were talking about.
Yeah, it's just too.
We started with the academics for the Israeli academics and how you got into it, and you went.
Wow, that was a long time ago, right? That was a week ago. Okay, so let's jump. Good God, you're gonna do some editing. You're gonna get mad at me.
This might get left in there.
But anyhow, so went into academics, right? So it comes from that. That's why I started with Joseph and everything. I mentioned that, referenced that. You start in a dark place, okay? And I was put out. I was put out of the kingdom, right? I'll take responsibility for everything. I was put out of the kingdom. I was driven by a brother to Tel Aviv. He dropped me off, and I had boxes, just 3 or 4 boxes of my things. There happened to be a hotel. That's where I told him to drop me off at. That you can pay. Back then it was 50 shekels and you can stay a night and everything. So I knew I could make 50 shekels a day, and I said, well, let me just let me
Did
just
you
do
know
that.
anything about Tel Aviv? The
Yeah,
Tel Aviv
this
area?
is because remember this was in 1991.
Okay.
This is right after the Gulf.
Okay.
That's the story in itself and everything.
So you did know the Tel Aviv area, so you knew what
yeah.
But you got put out.
Right. So, but again, it came out to, if I had to do it all again, naturally, so not hurting anyone, but I had to do all it again, I wouldn't want to change anything, right? Because I don't know. I'm happy where I am, sort of my achievements and everything. All praises to the Creator and the Kingdom and the saints. But anyhow, I was distraught because I never thought that I would be out of this kingdom that I was born into.
5 years old.
From on my birth certificate. This is my dynamic. This was my life. And all of a sudden I was out and I couldn't stop. The tears would not stop.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, I mean, I was dropped off in the afternoon around 2 o'clock. And the tears wouldn't stop. And I remember it was dark at the time. And I remember looking at the clock, it was around 2 o'clock in the morning. I was still, but no tears.
You cried them all out at that point.
Right. There was no Walt that you can go, order some tears, delivering service and everything. But I remember I was laying in the bed. The street light was coming through the window, and I'm just asking myself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I turned. This light was shining right on the box, and in the box was my School of the Prophets diploma.
Wow.
And then I know this is going to sound strange. I'm not like one of those brothers. You don't hear me talk like,
this is those times.
One of those times. This is the second time, right, that I heard Nasi Shaleak's voice at this time. And he said, just like Nasi Shaleak would say, agitated. Do what you've been made to do. And that School of the Prophets, there was a solemnness that fell upon me and a peace that fell upon me that I was able to sleep. But the next morning, I got up, got myself together, and went to the Ministry of Education and took that School of the Prophets diploma and presented it to them. And I said, I'm a teacher. I can teach language and everything. And you know what? They looked at it. They took it in the back. It was about half an hour, and I'm just waiting there. And all of a sudden, y'all start, Satan come. Are you crazy? The School of the Prophets.
This is no school that we know of in Israel.
Right. What is this School of the Prophets and everything? That's all this is coming through my mind.
And they certified you right there.
She came back. She said she had a list of schools that she wanted me to go to be interviewed. But she said at this point, okay, stay in contact with me. I'll never forget that her name was Barbara Weissman. She was American. She said, you stay in contact with me, let me know. I went to 2 schools, and both of them said, yeah, we'll take him.
Wow. And what grade level was that?
I started off in junior high school. In Mitzpeh, I was doing private lessons in elementary, but they started me off in junior high school at that point.
With your School of the Prophets degree.
Right. And this was just a degree for history and education. So that was considered, I had to start equating that to the standards out there. So that was your first degree that you get is equivalent to a first degree.
Right.
Now, second degree was my spiritual investigators, and that's another level, right?
Right.
And then my third degree was when Nasi Shaleak called me doctor. This is another thing that he called Sarkazrael, he called Brother Avner, and we were in his chambers, and he told us, this is after from years with spiritual investigators and everything. He said, it's time for you to work on your theses for your doctorate. And he gave us subjects. Sarkazriel knows this. Brother Abner knows this. It's just so happened 6 months later, I was put out, and everything. And I guess the Spirit said, well, in order for you to work on your doctorate, you're going to have to be out of here because you won't have time to do, But anyhow, I was put out, and I did my doctorate. It took years. It took actually 13 years. Nasik had the stroke had started to really, weigh on him and everything. And he would call me at intervals. He would call me and he would say, "Meet me at L'Chaim, at the restaurant on Ben Yehudah." Mm-hmm. And I would meet him there, and he would say, "Give me a report." And during this time, I was matriculating based on that certificate, that diploma. And I'll never forget it. It was either Avimelech or it was the other brother, the thin brother that was married to the sister from the islands. Yirmiyahu.
Oh, okay.
So Nasik got there. He couldn't come out. He was at that point. He was just incapacitated. He was just laying in the back of the van, and they had to help him. Mm-hmm. And I could barely hear him. And I was giving him my report. And at the end of it, he could barely move his hands and everything. And Avimelech or Yirmiyahu said, "You need to get closer so you can hear," and everything. And he said 2 things to me. He said, now I was out. I didn't have contact like that. I wasn't coming down like that. I never thought that I was out of the kingdom. That's one thing. I was out of Dimona.
Right.
But I never cut myself from it. I did what I had to do out there. But I never cut myself from this idea. So there are 2 things he said. I could barely hear him, but he said, if you want to hear my voice, it's time to come back. And when he said that, it released something in me. Because I didn't feel comfortable with coming down at that point. Mm-hmm. But it released something in me. And after he said that, he looked at me, and he was shaking
right.
everything. And then he said, "Doctor." I cried. I got a problem with crying and everything, but I cried. When I left him, he asked me to do one thing, to stay in contact with him, because he wanted some type of device that when he spoke, it could amplify his voice. That's another story. But anyhow, that's when I started
coming back,
right? And it was verified when Sarkazriel went on an assignment to Amsterdam and asked Abba if I can come with him. And Abba gave him the green light.
Wow.
And I went with Sarkazriel he was a crown brother at that time, on a mission to Amsterdam. So I don't care when people say what they say. He's not a doctor. He's not this. He's not that. I don't care about that. Mm-hmm. I've never... People say things about me. I don't feel that I need to defend myself. I know who I am. It reassured me as the me who I am. You don't have to call me doctor. I don't want you to call me Ben David, though. Right. My name is David. But you don't have to call me doctor. I'm not worried about you calling me doctor. But let me share something with you that just took place 2 weeks ago. There are 2 universities on Eden, one in Kenya and one in Ghana, that heard about me through the colleges and universities out here and want me to help them translate the English Bible into their mother tongue.
Wow. So how would you do that when you don't speak their mother tongue?
They want me to come there I don't want to go there. But they want me to come there, but I don't want to go there.
Why?
We're going to work through Zoom. Because one thing I said to myself,
you travel?
I don't like to travel. Well, I traveled. When I was out there, I did it. I did everything.
You've been back to America?
I went back to America just one time, and it was just too sad.
Really?
It was just too sad. And then what really broke me was I was sent to Ukraine by one of the universities, and they're trying to establish relationships, right? So it was sending me with another groups of other people, and when I went to Ukraine, we were in a hotel. We were there for a day, and we had a day free. So they said that they would take us to the mall, right? This was in Odessa, borders the Black Sea and everything. So they picked us up. They took us to the mall. And the mall was right across from this park, this big park and everything. Let me tell you about the mall first. When we went into the mall, the malls were like, you remember the old shuk when people would come out and they would have their little selling their vegetables and stuff.
Shuk,
yeah.
That had that muddy dirt path down the middle.
Yeah, and you had
little cardboard stands.
Yeah, that was their mall.
So they meant an open air market.
In a building.
It was inside of a building.
Inside a building, different every floor you had, but there were no tables. They just had blankets laid out, and they had their products or anything that they were selling
on the ground,
right on the floor in these buildings and everything. That was their mall, and he said it like pride, you know. But after we came out of there, I said I noticed children around I don't like to use the word kid because I believe if we are Hebrews, meaning moving from one consciousness to a higher consciousness, we have to take it out of the idea of kid, which is an animal, to a child, put it in, but which is offspring in Hebrew, yeled, yalad, lalede. But anyhow, they were children. I said, is this a holiday or something like that the children are playing out there? And he looked at me and said, children playing? He said, come with me. And it was me and another lecturer, right, administrator. And these were children, but when you look at them, their faces were dirty. They didn't have shoes. They had a little smell, a strong smell on them. And he said, they're not playing. They live in these boxes. And I'm talking about a park full of cardboard boxes. That's how many children were out there.
They lived in those boxes.
They lived in those boxes. Those were their homes. You didn't see any adults.
So these were like homeless orphans.
Homeless orphans. A park full of them. That broke me. Because at that point, I would travel. Went to the season that I was okay financially and everything, so they had these deals that you can travel for weekends and everything, and that's what I did. But after that, when I went back to the hotel, I cried. Because I said to myself, how can I be, because I remember our purpose. Our purpose is to organize, be the light, organize, right? This is one of the things that we're supposed to be organizing and everything, but my mind was enjoying myself and stuff like that. I'm not trying to discourage anyone from living their lives. I'm just sharing my experience. Okay? From that point on, I haven't traveled out of the land. I've done some special assignments for a couple of colleges and universities and everything. They call on me all the time. And then, you know, these people, they can get you anywhere they want you. Because I wasn't supposed to, you know, I had debts. And
you weren't supposed to be allowed to leave.
Right, because this is when a lawsuit was put on me because of, you know.
Some things
and everything. But, I told them, listen, and they just smiled and said, don't worry about it. Just have a suitcase.
You can always get out.
Yeah.
They can always get you out. But
okay, so yeah, that's why. That's when. That's not my matriculation through these. This all of a sudden this college heard about me and wanted me to come in this college, and it got to the point that the minister of education at that during this season was Shulameet Aloni.
I remember the name.
Yeah, I can show you the pictures and everything. That she wanted me to lecture with her and everything, and we were all in the plan and began to plan as to how to do a revolution in how English and Hebrew is taught in universities and colleges and everything.
Okay.
So all praise goes to Yah, the kingdom. You were part of it and everything. Just you and others that came was reinforcing my decision that, okay, I left, quote unquote, my family. I left my future in America to come here. But when I saw you and others and you guys,
more and more people coming,
it was like,
I made the right choice.
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm all right. So, yeah. But it's always been seeming like every step higher for me was rooted in mud and pain and
Really, you made a way out of no way. You made a way when it seemed like you were a Joseph. You were in the pit.
Yeah.
And you made a way. It wasn't you.
Yeah, that's when
No, but in a sense it was you, because you had to trust in Yah. If you hadn't trusted in Yah, it wouldn't have happened. You had to trust. You had to believe. You had to know in your being. See, I believe that there's a knowing in our being at our cellular level that sometimes we're not in touch with.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Don't diminish you and your role in this.
That's why I don't deny anything. I can't deny anything. I look at you as a king, queen. You have your talents. And if anything I can do to help with those, develop that, then I'm here for you. But that's what's supposed to be the whole idea of the kingdom of Yah. It's to recognize the resources in individuals and help them develop. Yeah. That's what education is supposed to be. But these are the things that we miss because of are we getting the understanding or the right comprehension of what a kingdom is?
Well, what it makes me think of, and I don't know how valid this is, that scripture that says, many are called, but few will be chosen. Maybe the numbers were relevant or a necessity, but it wasn't for everybody.
Right.
Everybody's not gonna vibrate on that same frequency to be able to get to where you're talking about.
I agree. This is my thing. I believe that at the end, if we're supposed to create, the ones supposed to be the vessels of that energy that you're talking about, because we're just vessels, right? Of two energies. There are only two, right? And you can measure that. The barometer for that are your deeds. Will tell you where you are, right? So those that are sincere and stay with that sincerity of this all, those are the ones. And then there are others, right? I saw this. Somebody put up a TikTok. They call it TikTok, right? Clip. They were filming throughout their window. I guess it was this window, but they lived on a hill, so they had this crow that had gotten this piece of plastic, and the crow would walk the plastic to almost the top of the hill, put the plastic down, and down the hill, right? And they were calling, come look at this and everything. I believe that was one of the souls that didn't get it right. Right. So in life,
but they said crows are very intelligent. They say they are extremely intelligent.
Yeah.
But you think that's somebody?
I think that's one of those reincarnations when the lion was getting another body and everything. He was said, "Excuse me, this lion over here, the crow lion." So I believe in his mind, crow's mind, says, "What? I like skiing and everything." That's him, reincarnation.
That's a thought.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. Based on the academic experience, is that how you went into developing focus and the IILS?
Excellent point. IILS is the Israel Institute of Language Study.
Right.
Israel because we're Israel, not because of
not because of your name.
There's a scripture that says that when we are returned, we will be the children of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Israel. So that's why I don't use the name Tate. I haven't said this to a lot of people, but I have a reoccurring nightmare. It's been a long time now that I wake up in a cold sweat. And it goes like this. It's like that Shikun environment,
mm-hmm.
right? And I told you that it was love there. There was sincerity there and everything. The brothers and sisters had woken up, had come into the consciousness of identity and purpose, and we were working together. And there was an energy there. And then the brothers started to get sick, and on their deathbeds, their last prayer was delivered in the language of the colonizers. And I'll wake up like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I can't let language go. It doesn't let me go.
Uh-huh.
But this is a nightmare that I've had for since 2000 and that's when things started. This nightmare started hitting
mm-hmm.
me. It actually caused me to get on the laptop and start putting slides together as to how to teach the language and everything, right? But it didn't.
Hebrew language.
The Hebrew language and English.
Okay.
Both. Because it's the same.
Bombshell. It's the same. What do you mean?
Language is a tool. You have language and then you have linguistics. The difference is language deals with the essence of this thing that we call language. And that's what we talk about when we say Hebraic fundamentalism.
Mm-hmm.
It deals with the essence of it, right? The will, purpose, and intent of it, the spirit of it, right? And then you have linguistics, which deals with the construct of language. What an adjective is, what a verb is, what an adjective clause, right? The 14 tenses in English and everything. So did that answer your question? We got to it because we get into it and all of a sudden we start going. We're gonna need somebody on the side, a red sign, white sign, we okay, and then the red sign, yeah. But like
no, you said they were the same.
Yeah, but this recurring nightmare. We were always told in the beginning. There were some things that we were told in the beginning that they're not being said today. One of them was that our last prayer would have to be in Hebrew. They said they would call it the acceptance prayer, would have to be in Hebrew, right? Do you remember?
I don't.
That's what they told us. The last prayer had to be in Hebrew.
Last prayer. That
last prayer, that if you have to return this body back into the dust of the earth, your last, and then we'd have to go on what prayer is, okay? Because there's a religious
concept of prayer.
So, but your last prayer would have to be in Hebrew.
Okay.
We were commissioned for that. I don't know if people remember that.
So I heard it, but there's a lot that I never heard.
So a lot of it, a lot of this was, that's the Israel Institute of Language Study. excuse me, one of the visions is to return what's called the pure language idea. And pure language in Zephaniah 3 and 9, it talks about a return of the pure language when we are gathered back and we're put back on track. The pure language idea would have to be returned. And that's the motto, you say, in Hebrew, in English, the motto of the Israel Institute of Language Study is to the return of the pure language idea. What is it? What do I mean by pure language? It doesn't mean that the world will speak the linguistic element or dynamic of Hebrew. It means that whatever language you speak, it will take it from one consciousness to a higher consciousness. So if you're saying fall in love, I'm going to use things that we already know. That's the soul that I talked about. The living soul, or the higher consciousness, is rising love. So if you're saying kid, if you're calling your children kids, then that's not Hebrew. Even if you're talking English, that's not Hebrew. But if you say children or Yeladim, then that's the higher consciousness. One of the problems of language has to be decolonized. Unfortunately, we were brought up in a culture that language wasn't important to us. We were all about feel it. You got to feel it. You got to feel it. And I understand that. But when we talk about a kingdom is a government. Governments have institutions. Institutions are ideas. We didn't think about that when we were in the Babylonian dynamic. You just talked English. And whatever trend, whatever expressions, idioms, vernaculars came out, you flowed with it. That's how we floated. When I was a little boy in the 60s, we would, what was the word? We never said neat. Not in Chicago. You would have got beaten up if you said neat in my neighborhood.
Like any
But before we said cool, that was groovy.
It was groovy. Yeah. Oh, we know. We never would have said neat. That's
right.
You'd have got stopped.
Right. Can you imagine you with the brothers and sisters and everything? Everything was stopped. And look at me standing. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
But groovy was the word.
Right. Right. So, but that was the language of still dissension.
Right.
It wasn't taking us back to, and that's a scenario that we also use. I think you noticed already that scenario of being on the starting line, and Adam was put there. Remember, Adam is a singular collective word, right? So it's put there. I'm trying to negate that whole idea of female. Male, right? Adam was both, right? That's why I say a woman can be Adam, a man can be Adam according to Scripture, right? So the objective was to get to the finish line. So when you get on the starting line, the objective is to get here. Here means, biblically so, it says, eyes haven't seen and ears haven't heard the blessings in store for you, right?
Right.
So on your mark, get set, go. Instead of running forward, we've been running backwards for almost 7,000 years now. So the objective was to, and that means, and I'm just quoting what Abba has been saying. The only one that's quoting this right now is Minister Cosrael. I'm going to get in trouble for this. Minister Cosrael. But don't erase it, because I'm proud of that brother.
He said some things in some of the presentations I went to that I was like, it just really fed my soul.
Because he's doing what's in him to do. I think we talked about the fly and the honeybee. We talked about that, right?
Share it with the audience.
The bumblebee the honeybee was on his first flight out to collect pollen from the flowers. And on his second flight, he saw a fly dealing with
what flies
deal with. The biological term for that is feces.
Right.
Is that okay to say?
Yes.
You won't have to block that out.
You can use
feces. It was feces, right? And so, and the honeybee was he was totally astonished. He was shocked. He couldn't understand why would the fly want to deal with feces. He went back, and he couldn't sleep.
You have all these stories.
I got this from Nasik Mishnah. That he put that in me, but he couldn't sleep, right? And so he got up the next morning, and he said, "I need to have a conversation with this fly that likes to deal with feces." So can you imagine the bumblebee, the honeybee, interacting with this fly, trying to convince the fly that nectar, honey, is better than feces? And sometimes we find ourselves in these relationships with others. Why aren't you doing it like this? Do it like this. Do it like this. Now you have to have discernment here, okay?
Right.
But with the Sar Khazriel situation, he's going through that right now. I don't know if he's going to like me expressing this, but anyhow, he's doing what he does. Now, he's the only brother that I saw, and I've been around for a while. I live with Abba. He could go to Abba and ask Abba questions not about what Abba is doing, but he would ask the question, why? Right now we have, right. We're having brothers and sisters that are studying Ben Ami instead of studying what Ben Ami was talking about. And Ben Ami was talking about a kingdom. They know Ben Ami. They can say, well, Abba said this, and that's good. But did they understand Abba's message, all his writings, his presentations to us from the beginning were about a kingdom. So how many of us understand that? So how did I get off into this? This is where we have to stop it and have to go back and rewind.
Because it always goes off into something else. So, I have no idea where we were. But we're moving into the closeout. We're going to skip the trivia questions.
Okay.
Your conversation has just been so empowering and heavy that it's not nerdy. Not nerdy. Definitely enjoyable. But so one of my last questions, that last two sections, is always about the youth. With everything that you know, and when you look at the youth today, that video, perfect example, and you see where our children are. If this was a starting point, or this was where we're supposed to be going, and you talked about that 7,000 years going backwards, that's still backwards.
Decadent, right.
So what do we do? How do we, we spent years, I've been here, 46 years myself. And even though I'm not technically a member of the community at this point, I have a belief system of good and right and integrity and morality, values and principles that my parents raised me on. I have a sense of, I don't refer to it as God or Yah, but that sense of a source energy, of something bigger than ourselves that guides and directs us if we tap into it. So that's what I want for all of humanity. I want that for our children. How do we get them there? It may not look like the kifar and the way that we've done it in the past, but how do we get them there?
We have to define there, right? Right?
Okay.
Wouldn't we? if you have a leader, there's supposed to be an objective that leader is supposed to have in his mind, and he's supposed to be able to articulate that objective to those that are following him, right? One thing about that very quickly, but we're going to stay on this point this time because I'm going to be consciously thinking about the question and everything. Our concept of leadership, I'm going to get in trouble, but I don't care. Our concept is something.
What I was going to say is that I don't see it as a leadership issue. You know why? Because at this point, all of us have been at this long enough that we each have an individual role and responsibility. Leadership has their roles and responsibilities that they have to be accountable for, but we cannot keep being sheeple. We have a responsibility ourselves.
I agree 100%. And that's what I was getting ready to say. Our definition of, I'm not going to say our, there's a definition that's been accepted by the world that if you have leaders, then you have to have followers. You have to be followers, right?
Okay.
There's this thing about if everybody's the chief.
All chiefs and no Indians.
And no Indians and everything. Do you know that idea is rooted into paganistic Greek philosophy?
I would not be the least bit surprised.
Absolutely. So if someone thinks that I'm the leader, you're supposed to follow me, then that's just signs of the source of his ideas of leadership. Biblically so, from a Hebraic fundamentalist perspective, you were created a leader in the image of Yah, in the image and likeness of Yah, male and female, and he called them Adam. So that means you were brought to this, you were put in the stomach or the stomach of your mother, right, with leadership in you, because Yah needed to fulfill his will, and his will is not for us to worship him. That there's no such thing as worship in Hebrew in Scripture. That's an English mistranslation of the word work. And there's a difference between work and a job.
Okay.
When you're doing your work now, the idea came to you, you invested your energy, time, finances into this, and you're not even finished yet, so you can't let it go, right? That's why you can't let go of this, because this is a part of your work that was put in you when you were put in your mother's womb. And we can reference Jeremiah when he said, I knew you before I put you in. David, it says, it echoes the same thing. A few of the prophets, that whole idea it echoes in this Hebrew dynamic, genealogy, genealogical perspective and everything. So, I forgot the question. No, I'm kidding. But leadership is you finding that, discovering that in you, developing that, and this is what you serve. Our idea of serving is more than just checking in, because it's a government, so you have to have protocol. I am not bucking protocol. This is a government, right? But I would check in with Nasi Shaleak. Sarkazriel would check in with Nasi Shaleak. But Nasi knew that we had to do what we had to do also.
Right.
And we were actually judged more so of doing what we had to do outside of Nasi Shaleak's chambers and everything. So, the children. This is why we have to have an environment that will be able to, for our children to help them find that gift in them. Because all of them have a gift.
To help them find that gift.
That's the idea of the kingdom. That's what dedication is supposed to be.
Wow.
It's all based on that. You can imagine when a child, you've seen these clips of, this is funny, but there's this clip on TikTok also, right? That, what can I say? Sometimes when I'm just bored of being a nerd and everything, I go to TikTok. So get mad at me, all right?
Okay, I'm on social media all day, every day, okay? It's not that social media is the issue. It's the content that entertains you. Right. I find the positive things that work for me.
Because you're in that frequency and everything. Yeah. Your spirit, your will, purpose, and intent draws you, and it'll keep drawing you.
It comes.
You know why? Because you're a part of the kingdom. Now let's get back.
Our children.
Our children. So they're little leaders.
Wow.
Everybody's a leader. Now let's go biblically. So in the book of Genesis, the 26th chapter, it delineates that we're supposed to have dominion. And then it delineates what we were supposed to have, and dominion is simply stewardship, administration, management, organization, right? So all those that are sensitive to that word and still in their minds are sensitive to the idea of being a slave and everything, I just want to
clarify that. Yeah.
All right. So that's dominion. So it's not a word we're supposed to be shy away from.
Okay.
All right. Try to change. Dominion. We're a king. Our father is a king, so he wants to have dominion, and he wants to spread his influence throughout his dominion. All right, so that dominion environment reflects his desires and what he is and everything. The children, we have to. It's more than. It's not just the children. Remember, we said, Whitney Houston said, "I believe the children are the future." She made a mistake. Mm-hmm. I'm still waiting on one of the performing artists to create this new song, because that's where new songs come from, new experiences and everything.
Okay.
We got to let go of this singing with playbacks from, even though I love that. As a matter of fact, I'm putting the band together now to get out there and do that stuff. Absolutely, that's another subject.
No, Shut up! Get out of here! You sing. You gonna sing for us?
No. Because you need another 3 or 4 hours and everything. But anyhow, my point.
You were saying the children being the leader of the song from Whitney Houston.
Right. Okay. So everybody has a dominion element in them.
Okay.
Now, if you're a leader, that's the first thing you're supposed to do, is to be able to recognize the resources, the saints, and look and say, okay, he's good at that. I don't care about what he's done in the past, what people said about him, what he did, this and that and other. That he wasn't brought here to do that. That's the challenge being here. That's that challenge with Satan coming and testing and everything. Everybody's tested. So, what can she do? We need her. Let her do what she does. What can he do? We need him. Let him do what he does. That's for those adults, okay? That's for them. Recognizing we're raising kings and queens. Let us be what we're supposed to be. Abba Gadol, he let me be what I'm supposed to be. He didn't hint, but Abba did have his purpose. And his purpose was to establish this infrastructure and these institutions, and he did that. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have to be rigid with that. Sometimes when someone wants to do this, but he had to do what he had to do.
Right.
Abba's not here with us now. That means that you're in a place now, do what you have to do, just like you connected to all those virtues that you believe in. You might not call yourself a member of the community, but you're not a member, because you join a religion. You're a citizen of a kingdom, a government. You're a citizen of a government. You don't join a kingdom. One of the characteristics of a kingdom is that the king chooses you. You were chosen.
Wow.
You can't elect a king. He's anointed. Abba was king. We have those in positions of influence that still are questioning the idea who Abba was. Was he a king? This is where I get in trouble. You understand? So we have to understand this idea of a kingdom. You're a king, feminine, but you're a king. So if our adults can think that, they're not kids. We need to stop calling them kids. Maybe that word is influencing our consciousness as to our outlook, and then we see clips like that because a kid is an animal. That's a frequency.
As well as the negative social media that they follow.
Right. But we have influence. Yeah. Now I told you that it says our people are destroyed because of not destroyed or silenced because of lack of what's that knowledge that we're lacking? Identity and purpose. You are who are you? You're not American. You're not Hebrew. You are a son, and we are sons and daughters of God. We're kings. And we've been granted legal authority to rule over this planet. And it's been put back in our hands after 6,000 years, 7,000 years, it's been put back in our hands. What are we going to do with it? Scripture says that if we don't do anything, then the lights of the stars would slowly just be turned off. There won't be anything. Is that what we want? Is that what we want? Those babies that I saw, those children I saw in that park, is that what we want? We see what's happening with us. Is that what we want? Wake up. It's in our hands. It's not leadership. It's in our hands.
And
wake up.
Responsibility.
And you know what? If we don't do our purpose, history will record us as generational thieves.
Generational thieves.
You were brought here for purpose. I could still be in, people my age right now are gone. My first cousin is suffering from cancer. We be gone over there. Let's wake up now. You want to go back to that dynamic? Wake up. This is an opportunity for us. It's not about David. It's not about me. I have to birth this idea of the pure language idea. I don't care if I don't get support. It's not easy for people to understand. It's not easy, you know. I just wasn't blessed with that, I guess. I don't know. I was in love with a woman. Lost her because of this purpose. I couldn't stop. I could have stopped, but I couldn't. So there's casualties to all this and everything. Wake up. We have an opportunity. It's in our hands. We can't be silent. Everybody's supposed to be jumping up and down. That was just a symptom, though.
Right.
That was just a symptom
of a greater
root cause. We cannot lose the kafar. I'm going to tell you why. I get called to lecture. At the lectures, I talk about the kingdom. And I talk about my experiences with the brothers and sisters here and what we've done. I'm not a national spokesperson. Right. I make that clear every time I do a lesson or course. I am not a national spokesperson, but I know the questions are going to come out. Who are you? What are you here for? I'm not a national spokesperson, but I do know this, that all this is in our hands. If you may not live for eternity in this
particular
flesh and blood, you may have to return it to the dust of the earth from where it came from. Don't say your last prayer in English, the colonizer's language, because you were chosen for this Hebrew dynamic. That's why we are here. This is how I look at it. I may be wrong, but this is how I look at it. That's why I want to get this language. I'm still learning I'm still learning this language. Mm-hmm. I study this language and everything, and I help others get it also. Told you 2 universities now are reaching out because they want to get this language and everything.
Okay.
So I must be doing something right. I'm not taking the credit. All credit goes to that frequency that I want to believe that because I'm sincere. It says that, it looks at me and says I'm sincere. I've dedicated my life to this. Mm-hmm. And the fruit are ideas, you know. So we got a lot of work to do.
We do.
For the children. This was my School of the Prophets. People are going to laugh at this because they're going to say, oh, here you go, here it comes. But when I did that, my presentation at our graduation, I remember Dr. Martin Luther King when he said, and this is a message to the children, that if you can't be a tree on the top of the hill, be a shrub in the valley, but be the best little shrub on the side of the rill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. It isn't by size that you win or you fail, but be the best of whatever you are. Greasy locks and black complexion cannot forfeit nature's claim. You are sons and daughters of Yah. Skin may differ, but affection dwells in you and I the same. And if I was so tall as to reach the moon or to grasp an ocean at a span, I must be measured by my soul, but the mind, your ideas will set the standards of a man. That's my message for the youth. Was that nerdy?
You've said a lot. So my last question is always, is there anything we have not talked about?
Yeah. Yeah. Don't ask that question. Don't ask that question. Well, that's what Nasi said. Don't ask me that.
I'm going to request of you, because you're a wealth of wisdom, and it's wisdom that needs to be shared. So, as I requested earlier, to get those books published, and then you get you a microphone, and you can use your cell phone, and you start making content, because a lot of people are not going to read a book. But somebody may be taking a break from whatever it is that they're doing and be on TikTok and hear something that you have to say. You have to do this.
I appreciate you. I love you. I appreciate you, Rakaya. I appreciate that I'm meeting Rakaya. But I've always admired you. But I'm meeting Rakaya, and I appreciate you.
So, with that, we're going to close out. I just want to say to everyone, Toda Rabah, today it's obviously going to be a more than one part presentation because so much has been covered. But just want to thank you again, Dr. David Yisrael. Appreciate it. Toda to you. Peace out.